Let's start with the tale of two Dominics. Rusty, you broke the news on Tuesday about Dom Blaylock's decision to go to Georgia Tech. And I think logic has soundly weighed in the favor of many a dog fan that is looking at this respectively. And when you consider Blaylock's career, going to Georgia Tech is somewhat of an exception, it seems like.
Yeah, he typical Dom. I go back to his sophomore year. I was a Sunday morning. I got a text to call him. I was like, that's weird. On Sunday morning, and about 10 o'clock in the morning, I called Dom, and he said, hey, I want to commit. I said, okay. I said, commit to Georgia? He goes, yeah. Can you do a story? I said, yeah. When do you want to do it? He goes, can you be here in an hour? I was like, well, yeah. So I drive down. I pull in the driveway, shoot about 4 or 5 pictures, get about 2 or 3 quotes from him. And he goes, you going to put that up today? I said, Dom, I'll go down the street and type your story up and put it up. And that was literally the end of his high school recruiting. For 2 years, every school in the South tried to get Dominic Blaylock to take a visit, and he never took a visit anywhere, never. And he was done. Told all the coaches don't call him. And so last night I'm sitting here about 8:30, same spot I am, doing a little bit of work, writing some notes, get a text from his family. Hey, Dom's going to send you a quote. He's committed to Georgia Tech, wants you to put it out for him. I was like, okay. And so I called him up and got a few quotes from the family to go along with Dom. But, the message was clear. The message was clear that he loved everything about Georgia. He's getting his degree Friday from University of Georgia. And, there was a bunch of schools, a bunch of Power 5 schools reaching out to him. I think the determining factor for him going to Georgia Tech was an IT department. He has he wants to learn, he wants to expand into their department. He wants to give it a shot at football, see if he can get a few more touches maybe at Georgia Tech. Buster Faulkner certainly sold him on that. But his 2 brothers, his older brothers, who were SEC football players, live in the city. They're really close. So he's very close with John Fitzpatrick, interesting enough. So he's a former Georgia player, living in the city as well. So, Dom, I think he thought there might be a little bit of backlash. I'm not sure he was really worried. But at the end of the day, I don't think anybody could step aside and look and say this is not a decision for him, not a good one for him, and just go see where it goes. But, this was about life after football as well. So we have a degree from University of Georgia, and looks like he'll have a degree from Georgia Tech or certificate in that department he's at as well. So it's hard not to root for Dominic Blaylock. I don't care where he goes. I mean, this guy is everything right about high school recruiting, is everything right about college football, had 2 ACLs, well documented, and just hung in there. So end of the day, man, Dominic Blaylock should be thanked for his time, what he went through. He leads at Georgia with 2 national championship rings, made some big catches in some big games.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that he'll get the DGD. If he doesn't, a guy, Glenn Hartley's giving it to him there. But I think at the end of the day, that when you look back on Dominic Blaylock in 10 years, he'll still be welcome anywhere in Athens to walk in any building.
Well, he's not the first and not the last to go to a rival and still be considered someone that made great contributions to the program. Palmer, what were you about to say?
I was going to say, and the fact that he was, around the team this spring, was present at the spring game, says a lot about who he is and the way that his teammates and these coaches see him. It wasn't a, hey, let's get you out the door. Let's keep you away type deal. They wanted him around. I mean, and so I can only imagine what that last game of the regular season is going to be like for him. I think it might be a little bit more sentimental if they were making the trip to Athens but I guess he's got 2 years of eligibility left. So his last game of college football, if Georgia Tech isn't playing in a bowl game or an ACC championship, technically his last game of college football could be played in Sanford Stadium. So that's pretty cool to look that far down the road. Obviously, like you said, Rusty, just the way that he handled that recruiting process with you, I felt like it was a lot of the same, in talking to him. through his return from the injury, the recovery from the injury, he's very down to earth, understands that he's here, and he wanted to have a role, and whatever that was, he was going to do it to the best of his ability. And I think there's a lot that's, to be respected about that, somebody that handles himself that way. So absolutely DGD. I think the Uncle Glenn approval is the only one that you need.
That's all we need on this show. I go back to 3 games in the season in particular where Georgia needed to move the chains through the air because nothing else was really working or just wasn't what they needed at the time. And I think back to the Missouri game, I think at Kentucky, and I think the picture that we've got up on the screen, Ohio State, when Stetson needed a sure-handed guy, probably wasn't burning anybody this season, maybe because of those injuries, I'm not sure. But when the Dogs needed to find somebody in the sea of the opponent's defenders, they could find Dom Blaylock. So he left this season with some major contributions in games where Georgia either was kind of sputtering on offense or had to answer blow for blow their opponent. And that's what Ohio State was.
And Wes, I'll add to that with the picture that you're showing here. A little bit of context to that. I think it's really cool that they dialed this up when they did. Believe it was earlier in the game, and big third down conversion. Ohio State had put up some points early on. This was a big third down conversion, and it was the same play that they ran against Florida. That the ball went off of Dominic's hands and into the defender's hands. Credited as an interception for Stetson Bennett, probably more so Dom's fault than anybody else's there, as opposed to being able to come down with it. But the trust that they had in him to dial that same play up, one that hadn't, worked necessarily to perfection earlier in the season, dial it up again in one of the biggest moments, the so-called national championship game. I think that it was pretty clear that's that day, and certainly a couple Mondays later that those were the 2 best teams in college football playing that night in Atlanta.
Yeah,
how long ago does it seem that touchdown pass from Jake Fromm to Dominic Blaylock at Auburn when he got behind the defense? That was
at Auburn.
Had one against Florida that year too.
Florida. Yep.
So he's got some good ones too. I think everybody being agreed. Look, everybody's going to cheer for Dom Blaylock except for one game, and he knows that.
Before we wrap that up, Rusty and Palmer, this is open to you too. You mentioned the Buster Faulkner connection. What does that mean for Blaylock? Is it just about the familiarity, or do you think this could probably help him climb the depth chart, just having that relationship as he transitions to Atlanta?
Terminology. He knows the offense. He knows what he's trying to run. He goes, hey, this is what we called it at Georgia. This is what we're calling it here. Buster Faulkner has been through a spring at Georgia Tech now. He kind of knows what he's got. So he could tell Dominic Blaylock, hey, look, man, you can freaking play here. You know what I mean?
That's probably what he's telling him.
You know what I'm saying? Don't worry about anything else. If you like this IT department, come get your degree and education. But you want to get some touches, we need you. And you know the offense, so it's not a long curve there. Might be a few words here and there. But, Buster Faulkner certainly and it's interesting tonight. I was in a Georgia Tech pod, but they lost a kid tonight, a quarterback. It's interesting who they're going to wind up picking up. Could be a kid out of the Athens area. So we'll see what happens in that 2024 class. But when you start talking about Dom Blaylock, that was probably the easiest transition for him. And he also wanted to stay close to home.
Smart kid.
And along those lines, I think that when he's making this decision, May 9th, he announces it. Had he gone somewhere that he wasn't familiar with the offensive coordinator, there's a lot of terminology and stuff to pick up in not a long amount of time. He's going somewhere where he's going to understand that he is at a little bit of a disadvantage if he wasn't around for the spring. Obviously, it was important for him to get that degree from Georgia because he entered the portal in that first window and then announces after the second window has closed. Obviously, important for him to get that degree from Georgia. But I do think it is important that he went somewhere where he's going to have some familiarity with coaches, with terminology and stuff. Helps a lot that he's going somewhere like that, especially with the timing that he made this decision.
All right, so we open the show with a tale of two Dominics, Dominic Blaylock and Dominic Lovett, who I caught up with earlier this week at the Pollock Family Foundation golf tournament, and just happened to see him in the parking lot, man. I was walking out on my way out, and Lovett, interestingly enough, bought 100% of his golfing attire that day to go out and play, and totally looked the part, man.
Did he have clubs before? Did he have clubs before, or was that bought on that day too?
I think he borrowed the clubs.
Okay.
I don't think he bought a full set of clubs and got sized up and all that.
I was going to be really impressed if he had done that.
No, that would have been an act of God, I'm pretty sure. But he looked good, man. He looked the part. And I was like, hey, are you Dominic Lovett? And he said, yeah, that's me. And just got a few minutes to catch up with him and see what his experience has been like in the portal, why he picked Georgia, and got a story up about that behind our DawgsHQ premium paywall for our subscribers. I know many of you watching tonight already do that, but look, he's already chatted with the Players Lounge and Warren Brinson too. So there's a lot of Dominic Lovett on your timelines this week already. I think Georgia fans are going to love this kid. He is already fitting in very well with his teammates. I talked to a couple of them that were at the tournament as well on Monday, the charity event, and they're like, guys, we like all of our transfer portal guys this year. They're all good fits, but Lovett, they were particularly pumped to have him on the roster.
Yeah, I mean, I think he is a – go ahead.
Yep.
I was just saying – go ahead. I was just saying I think that he is the best portal pickup that they could have gotten, for that position. It was certainly a need. I went on the record. God, I can't remember what piece I was writing, but it was my three things we learned, two questions we've still got, and one prediction. After spring practice, my prediction is that Georgia is going to have that 1,000-yard receiver this year. And I think that there's a chance that I think there's three guys that could do it, and Dominic Lovett is one of those guys. Because there are three guys that are capable of that big of a production, it could be harder for each of them individually to get there. We very well could see, 2, 3, 900-yard receivers, and a 1,000-yard receiver, and then, 2 800-yard guys. But Lovett has that potential. I mean, I'm really excited to see what he's capable of doing look at those Missouri quarterbacks over the last couple of years. It's been a little bit of a turnstile there. They've had some good guys, but certainly, I mean, they were replacing guys through the transfer portal left and right. It felt like, I'm excited to see what he can do in this offense with this quarterback, Carson Beck, and just overall really excited to see what he can do, what he adds to this Georgia wide receiver group.
Got short area. What's the popular word? Short area suddenness to him. He's going to be a problem to match up with. And you look at some of the things that Bobo can do. I'm pretty familiar with his offense, watching through the years, watching at Colorado State. The stuff he does, a lot of motion inside, like the 10 and stuff. And you start looking at those. Everybody knows that whip route now, those types of things. I like that. They've done a lot with Ladd McConkey. He's certainly going to get a lot of attention. But you put a guy like Lovett and Ladd on the same side, and you start watching feet. Next thing you know, you get crossed up, and a guy's open because they're both, kind of one-on-one beat you guys, and sure hands, and just change of direction, all those types of things at football. I think this Lovett pickup is going. We go back and look at this, in November and go, wow, that was a hell of a get for Georgia.
Yeah, just like Blaylock going into portal to a quote unquote, rival. I don't think Missouri and Georgia, no one's considering that a rivalry. But I was impressed with Lovett's ability to still maintain respect and not throw anything about Missouri under the bus. Between my conversation with him and the one with Warren Brinson, he learned a lot from Mizzou, and he gained a lot of confidence. Hey, I can do this at Missouri. In 2 seasons, the touchdown number is a little bit low. And Palmer, you alluded to the fact that it was kind of a revolving door of the quarterback situation over there at Missouri. So maybe the potential not fully tapped there. But he did have a rushing touchdown. He had some carries at Missouri. And I bet Mike Bobo's watching some of that tape and salivating a little bit because he's like, okay, this kid can be versatile and he can do some things for us. But when you see what he was able to do, be a headache for the elite defenses in the SEC, Georgia was one of them before he got hurt against the Dogs. You got to feel like you're pretty good if you're Lovett, if you're Lovett's offensive staff, that he's going to be able to continue that against Georgia's schedule this coming year, as it's a little bit soft, but you're going to have to square up time to time in some SEC road environments. And he and Ra Thomas, having guys that have been in the league, Kirby Smart is definitely taking advantage of that rule that took place in 2021 where you can get guys from the same conference, because that just helps Georgia from a culture standpoint. You know what you're doing from a competition standpoint and knowing what to expect on the road in this league.
Yeah,
I'll go ahead. I'd like to talk to Lovett and say, hey, how big are these dudes? And when you walk into Georgia and see all these guys, like, Missouri's an SEC school, but they don't have 1 through 85 like Georgia has. And you're probably thinking, God, I'm glad I'm on the same team with these dudes and not running routes against them anymore.
Well, and I mean, you look at the Georgia guys talking about those two, having gone up against both of them this past season. They're excited to have them on their side now. They're going to have to cover them more often, doing so every day in practice. But the fact that they're not going to have to line up opposite of a Ra Thomas or a Dominic Lovett in a game, guys like Kamari Lassiter, Javon Bullard, they were very excited about that this spring. And so, you can see Bullard right there having some trouble with Dom Lovett there.
Yep. About to catch that stiff arm if he can even catch him.
Yeah. So, I'm excited to see, Wes, you mentioned the rushing touchdown. That falls right in with what Georgia does with these guys. Look at Ladd McConkey last year, 7 receiving touchdowns, 3 rushing touchdowns, same stat line for Brock Bowers. To see a tight end doing that kind of thing is a different conversation. But to see a receiver that's being used in on those speed sweeps, on a screen pass that might be behind the line of scrimmage and count as a run or whatever it may be. Georgia uses uses the full, 53, 52 and a half or whatever it is. They use the full field. They get it to the edge as quickly as possible, and it's an extension of their run game. And so, we saw that last year with Kenny McIntosh. We saw it with Ladd McConkey, and I really think we're going to see it with Dominic Lovett this fall.
Yeah, those hidden rush yards that Kirby talked about last year. Let's get to a couple comments here before we give a shout out to our friends at Breaking Tea. Rhett Womack says he wants to see Dylan Bell get cranked up, maybe get some targets out of the backfield since my guy is built like a house. Is he built like a house?
He's pretty good. I'm like Rhett. I'm excited to see what Dylan Bell is capable of doing. I wrote a piece, earlier this spring before spring practice about, don't forget Dylan Bell and all this, because he was a big part of what Georgia's receiving room was last year. And we've seen a couple of those guys do it as freshmen, and step into bigger roles, get a taste of it as a freshman and then step into a bigger role as a sophomore. It may be hard for him to step into a huge role with the likes of Ladd McConkey, Brock Bowers, Dominic Lovett, Arian Smith, Marcus Rosemy, on and on and on. But Dylan Bell is very much a part of the plan for this receiver room. I'm going to answer a question here that Matthew C's got. He's asking, do I expect these guys to put up those receiving numbers because Georgia's unsettled running back room, the most that it's been unsettled since Kirby has been here? And I do. That's part of my thinking there, is that, you don't necessarily know what you've got with the running backs. You don't necessarily have a proven pass catcher out of the backfield. Combine those two factors there. Those yards have got to be made up somewhere. If you're not handing the ball off as often because you don't feel great about the running backs, or you're not handing the ball off as often because you don't feel great about the depth of those running backs. And then if you're not throwing it to the backs out of the backfield because they're not as strong of pass catchers as they have been, those touches have got to go somewhere else. And so that's why I do think that, without an extra tight end in there like Darnell Washington, we're probably going to see some more, 3 receiver, 4 receiver sets out there. I think Carson Beck has a really strong arm. I think that Georgia's going to try to spread it around a little bit. And, I think all that ultimately results in these receivers getting a lot more touches. And that's why I think that Georgia is going to have that 1,000-yard receiver guy.